Hey everybody, and welcome to another bonus episode of Cinemaholics. I am your usual co-host, Will Ashton, joining you once more in the hosting seat. I feel like I've been taking over as host for more of these bonus episodes of late, and I wasn't really expecting to be the host of the Jackass Forever episode, but I'll talk about why I am in a bit. But first, I want to introduce our guest. He is a frequent player here in the Cinemaholics parts. You got a new job title. I was going to say you've written for like Nashville Scene and the playlist and all that, but tell us about your new job and how have you been, Corey Woodruff?
What is going on, Cinemaholics? Will, it's good to be back.
It's good to have you.
I've been coming on this podcast for a very long time now. We're all starting to. Yeah, I think it has really been since the beginning.
Yeah.
We're all gathering dust at this point.
Yeah, I know.
But
like the Jackass crew.
Time. Exactly. Yes, the dust in the wind. Sadly, but yeah, no, I'm the new interim managing editor at the Williamson homepage. Which, unless you live in Tennessee, you probably don't know what Williamson County is. It is, I think, like the richest county in the world. So we have the most like per capita, at least in the United States, of like financial stuff, which if you drove around you get it. But yeah, there's a lot of money here, lots of money. But yeah, so I run a hyperlocal news organization now. So,
nice.
Yeah, staying local.
Yeah, I mean that's a big deal, but you also have another big deal today if you feel like sharing.
Yeah, I got approved to be a Rotten Tomato.
Nice.
So,
it's a very big deal. I mean, that makes
Is it? I don't know. I can't tell if it's like the most pathetic thing to be excited about or.
You're legit. You're too legit to quit.
So for some reason, like I'm sure many of you, like growing up and looking at Rotten Tomatoes on like middle school and being like, that's a thing.
Yeah.
And, because I mean, I grew up online and
that's
on the movie thing, like
professional job title that you can count on for stable income.
Yeah, exactly. I have made a career of writing movie reviews. Right. There's no way that industry is ever going to fall
that's
apart.
Not going to
go. No, it's going to be fine. Like middle school means like you're totally going to be able to do that for a career. Wink. And it's just like, and it's like, make sure journalism majors is exactly what you do, and make sure you narrow your focus when you get out of school. It's going to go well.
Nice. Well, I mean, honestly, man, congrats. Like, I don't mean to downplay your achievements here.
No, trust me. I think that it's one of those things where it's the coolest lame thing to be excited about.
But yeah, so that means we have a professional film critic talking about the fourth and maybe final Jackass movie. I'm not exactly sure what is going to happen from this point forward with the film franchise part of it. But yeah, so this is like I said, the fourth film from Jeff Tremaine. Not this fourth film ever, but the fourth film he's directed. He's done all three of these going back to 2002's Jackass the movie. And I feel like this is really a sort of like rags to riches tale for cinema. In that, I mean, it starts with, these kind of DUI kids just kind of goofing off, 20-something bums being a couple of naughty boys just kicking
putting
each
it mildly.
What was that?
Yeah, putting it mildly.
Yeah, being a bunch of, scallywags and... Yeah. Just
shooting themselves with the protective vests on and taking dumps on each other.
Just doing all sorts of lewd and crude things.
Saturdays for the boys.
Oh yeah. But I mean, I don't want to make it sound like it's like this sort of like frat boy culture. I guess it could fit into that, but I feel like the reason why, in part, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why the Jackass movies have endured, I think, throughout modern lens. But I mean, part of it, I think, is that there is a real sort of love and camaraderie between the guys. There is like the sense, especially going back to the early days you were talking about off the air, of like they had kind of like, morose or bleak beginnings as far as like they started off with this magazine. Maybe you should talk about that more, where they kind of tried to pull fast ones on a lot of kids and parents. What was that magazine called?
Yeah, so Jeff Tremaine was the editor of a magazine called Big Brother. There's a documentary on Hulu that I watched today called Dumb, the Story of Big Brother. I think that's the title. You can type in Dumb and you'll find it. Yeah, type in Dumb on Hulu. Yeah, and then your own face pops up. Yeah, exactly. It's a prank in and of itself. But, it's a weird, I found it to be really interesting, but for the first 45 minutes, it is kind of uncomfortable because, obviously skater culture, 90s, there's that huge push of counterculture and, people in their early 20s trying to push against the man. It's the rise of grunge. It's the rise of people wanting to break out of their 80s nuclear family households and, be themselves and look for stuff that's risque and edgy. And, they kind of channeled that all into Big Brother magazine. And, the catch with the magazine is that it's hardcore explicit nudity, sexual content, drug content, bodily fluid content, lots of very crass humor, profanity, which is fine if you're of a certain age. And I know that there's a whole conversation that you could have about, the different levels of whether people should be able to kind of know what they're getting into when they have children and all this stuff. But it's I never want to be a prude about stuff like that. But I even found myself being they're kind of doing some stuff that's not cool. I can imagine being a parent and having my kid looking at a picture of something porn level, and
a grown man's ding-a-ling.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just I can understand not wanting a 9 or 10-year-old to see that.
Right.
There's a certain level where it's yeah, I get it. And and some of the stuff felt more mean-spirited, more affrontive, and I feel that Jackass can't happen without that. So obviously it's the impetus. Yes, absolutely. It's the evolution, and I feel Jackass is the more evolved form of Big Brother. It's the more benevolent form. I think we were talking about earlier. It's it's just much more, because that's what that's the whole secret of Jackass, is that there is a benevolency and a desire to do no harm, which is the most ironic thing you can say about Jackass.
Right.
The whole thing is harm-based, but there is this Hippocratic oath they almost take to be okay, we're not actively setting out to make people's lives worse. And I feel that a lot of the counterculture stuff in the 90s didn't always take that into consideration, which is why it so existed on the fringes, but also why it kind of came under some heat. And, normally when you think about 90s moral panic, you think of people getting mad about South Park and Marilyn Manson and all that stuff, everything that kind of came out of Columbine, but which is obviously dark, but at the same time there was a major overcorrection from people to be this is bad, this is not appropriate for my child, the whole South Park movie is based on that. But this is the rare exception where I'm kind of I think people had a point, but it's just I think it's a miracle that Jackass kind of came out of this, because this was such a strange, but I think the people grew up. I think people kind of grew up. And again,
sure,
I know it's weird to be the Jackass guys grew up at the beginning, but it's yeah, I do think they did. I think that they were a little more mature in what they were doing, and it's that maturity funneled into such immaturity that kind of made Jackass work.
Yeah, I mean, that's you use the word evolve, and I feel that's kind of key, is that there is this sense that the series and then the film franchise did kind of evolve from a certain point, in that, we were saying, there's the MTV series, which is mostly, I mean, we were both talking off the air how we're not as familiar with the series, so I apologize if either or both of us kind of speak out of turn about it, but from what I've gathered from seeing clips and stuff over the years, it's really just kind of basic skate culture, punk and prank base thing where people, there's it's some teenagers kind of goofing around, and there's shock value, and there's even something sort of transgressive about the idea of putting a lot of this kind of sick and gross material on cable television. But there's only so much you can really do on cable television. I know Steve-O and Johnny Knoxville and Jeff Tremaine, I think they talked in the past about how they were trying to do stuff that was kind of pushing boundaries and being beyond the interest of good taste, but they can only really do so much in television form. So the show only lasted a couple seasons on MTV, but as fortune would have it, the popularity of the series was so great that they were just like, well, let's just give them a couple $1 million and some digital cameras and see what happens when they make the leap into the big screen. And as you mentioned, like South Park, there is a sense of like, okay, now they're on the big screen, they can kind of get away with the things that they couldn't do on television, but they're not really going to go away from what the TV show is, because it's not like there's like a plot or anything to the show. It's just a bunch of it's not like, I guess the show is technically a documentary, but the weird thing about the movies themselves is that they're not really documentaries, but they're not feature films. Like, they have cast and they have set pieces and stuff, but they don't have plots. And it's not like there's like dialogue per se. Like, there's like setups, but that's not really like, a script. So it's like the movies kind of have this weird sort of limbo state where they're not really any one particular thing. Yeah. And so they kind of become almost everything in the process. And that's what's so kind of fascinating and rich to talk about them from a critical standpoint. Because like you said, like, there is something very almost kind of primal and pure in that, like, you could just watch them as just simple, very juvenile entertainment where it's just people kicking each other in the balls and people pooping and, doing any number of things with fluids at any point. But there is like this, there has been several pieces and critical evaluations of it, as far as like, the transgression, obviously you mentioned, but like the coded homosexuality and the general homoeroticism of it, the, sort of the performative aspects of it, the idea of like pushing against the norms of culture, and like also this idea of pushing against the kind of comforts of suburban white lifestyles. And, that's kind of done very literal in the first two films with like the opening sequences where like, like we have like these kind of like suburban plazas that are being like erupted and eroded through our scallywag group of guys, just like crashing and destroying these like kind of suburban plazas and streets and all this stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's just like, I think a lot of this stuff is deliberate and a lot of it is indeliberate at the same time. Like, there is like the sense that, like, I think, as you mentioned, like, they are very thoughtful about what they do. And I think a lot of care goes into it than maybe some people gave them credit from the onset. But it is at the same time something that is just like, they're a group of guys goofing off and having fun. And that pure sense of jovial fun is very infectious and, even sort of spontaneous in some respects. And I think they just kind of capture that lightning in a bottle 3, now 4 times. And, it's kind of irresistible in that respect. But I don't want to speak more than you, because I want to hear kind of your thoughts about this franchise as a whole and what appeals to you about it.
It's interesting. Like, I think that Jackass continues to be one of the biggest miracles that we have in terms of like humor that has aged well. Because one of the biggest things I feel like we continue to talk about with comedy is like the shelf life that the general kind of medium has, right? Like the genre of comedy continues to be like, we don't know what we're going to take with us in 10 years.
Especially like transgressive comedy such as this
absolutely
stuff. Yeah, right.
Yeah, because like, one of the biggest influences for this obviously is John Waters. And, you have to look back at something like Pink Flamingos and kind of say, obviously this is still going to be incredibly off-putting, but it's still very transgressive for what it's trying to do. Like, a lot of Waters stuff has aged well because it's not trying to shock in a way that is actively trying to like, it's like it's getting a rise out of people, but Waters was a very progressive voice at the time. He was speaking to the culture in a way that others weren't, where you had a lot of the National Lampoon stuff, which probably operated on the other side of the coin than someone like Waters did, but a lot of the National Lampoon stuff has aged horribly because it was coming from an hegemonic voice, right? Those were the guys that were the kind of leaders on the playground,
Right. Well, I mean, certainly with John Waters, like, a lot of it is like this idea of like, the LGBT community, the Black community, a lot of segregated communities are there, but there's like these forces from kind of white, closed-minded, suburban, even like religious-minded people who are trying to keep them away or segregate them. And a lot of John Waters movies are about the idea of like them pushing out into like the mainstream, or like kind of like announcing or declaring themselves in a big over the top sort of way. And I feel like that adds to progressive. There's obviously a lot more John Waters, but like there's that sense too with the Jackass movies where it's like this sort of like pride in like the male body and the male form in a way that like the 2000s were very sort of closed-minded about like homosexuality and homoeroticism and all this stuff that I think that adds a lot to the lasting factor of the series for sure.
Absolutely. And I feel like that is one of the hallmarks of comedy, is that the best comedy usually comes from the outside voices. The people who are not necessarily a part of the mainstream, the people who are, like there's a reason like Mel Brooks movies have usually aged pretty well, and they still kind of have devout fans, is because, Brooks was kind of looking at the outside end. He was finding new ways to say things. And, you look at a movie, like especially like the 86 comedies like Revenge of the Nerds and such that have just aged terribly. And it's because I feel like they came from the top dog voices at the time. Like they were just the people who were appealing to the most bare senses of the moment, but doing so in a way that kind of was looking down on the audience, or at least the targets in the audience that, the movie wanted to deal with. And I think what Jackass was so great at, and what continues to be great at, is that it's very accessible in terms of like anyone's welcome. And I think that's one of the things that Jackass Forever did that I really appreciated, is they tried to diversify the cast. Which, it's kind of it's a delicate conversation, because it's like this is like a group of friends, and, groups of friends just come together how they do. But they've tried to evolve the idea that like Jackass really is for everybody, because everybody latched onto it. I mean, Jackass fans came from here, there, and everywhere. I mean, this was a pioneering work. I mean, it is a vital work for American comedy and American culture in general, because there really wasn't something like this yet. And, a lot of the Big Brother stuff was very out of reach. I mean, this was a thing that wanted to operate on the fringe, okay? Like, it was very delicately not for everyone. And what Jackass did is that they brought those kind of renegade sensibilities and made it not always palatable, because some of this stuff is very purposefully not palatable in some very exact ways, but they kind of brought in a sense of mirth that I feel like took away the anger and frustration of youth and channeled it into more of kind of a laissez-faire, like, well, you only live once, you might as well get into the ring with a bull, or, jump off a bridge and do something stupid. I mean, and obviously they're trained professionals. They're doing this with a lot of understanding of how to, manipulate the moment to make them feel safe. But like, I just feel like that the whole Jackass mentality is, I mean, obviously they're cheating death, and there's a lot you can kind of learn about the way that they've aged over the years. But I think the reason these films are still so viable is because of the way that they structure exactly who's being hurt, how they're reacting to it. And, I was listening to an old episode of Mark Maron's podcast with Johnny Knoxville that came out when Bad Grandpa went out. And it's like the rigors they have to go to even get a scene in a movie is just incredible. It's like they could shoot a great prank, and then when it comes to the releases, the person could be like, nope, I don't want to do this. And it would be completely gone. So it's like there's a whole legal aspect to this that they have to navigate, which I think makes it even more impressive. It's like, when people are getting pranked, you're watching people who are getting pranked who are okay with it, So it's like, legally, they're not going to put something in the movie. And the way that they go to the shop owners and talk about, hey, we're going to set this up and do this, it's just, there's such a care involved. And I feel like that if you didn't have like a huge empathetic current running under the Jackass franchise, it doesn't work. It's mean-spirited. It's just people trying to be mean to other people for whatever. Because, like, again, Jackass is never about laughing. It is about laughing at people, but it's about laughing at people you love. And if you didn't have that going on, and when you're looking at the general public, they're laughing with you. They're not trying to laugh at you. They're not trying to hurt you. They're not trying to make fun of you. They're just trying to bring you to their level, which is a really fun place to be. So I just feel continually that the Jackass movies hold relevance because, again, like, younger audiences are finding this stuff and loving it because it's almost timeless, which is kind of a really cool thing to feel like. And I still feel like Jackass things will continue to get made. And I think the reason I still respond to this stuff so much is because it makes you feel good in a way, not just because you're like watching people in pain, but it's because you're watching something that just feels like it comes from such a good place. And, you know, while there's definitely some downgrades to the way these guys lived in certain ways, like that we can talk about, which is really kind of sad and unfortunate, but like at least the art itself always holds a purity that I really appreciate.
Yeah, I mean, it's a weird word to use, but there's something oddly sort of cathartic about these films or with the Jackass franchise, in that there is like, I guess, this like sense of release. Obviously, like comedy is a form of release. It's kind of like laughing at something that is just very like instinctual and sort of just like from the gut. But there is, like you said, like this kind of like sense of, you know, like kind of like letting your inhibitions go and just kind of like reeling in the joy of something that is like, you know, almost very like primal and very like humanistic in a way that like, you know, it's kind of hard to describe in a nice, easy package. But I will say, like, I think the thing that I really appreciate and admire about the Jackass films and the Jackass franchise is that it makes it look so easy. And as we've kind of alluded to, like there are people who've emulated or tried to like copy the style because it looks really easy. It's just like, oh, you know, people goofing around digital cameras with their friends, especially in the cell phone era. Like that seems like something anyone could do. And you could watch any number of YouTube, like quote unquote prank shows. And like you, as you were mentioning, just like it doesn't even compare because it's just like they don't get the balance right. They just don't quite get what makes Jackass special. And I think that's kind of the reason why, even though like we are in this like TikTok era or YouTube era or like Twitch or vlog era where, you know, a lot of other people could do this type of thing, no one has really, I think, captured in quite the same way that the Jackass crew has. And that makes it sort of singular and also fairly universal at the same time in an odd sort of way. But obviously, like I've been mentioning, it is also rewarding because it's just like there is, like you said, that kind of timeless factor to it that you know, it doesn't seem like something that should be timeless, but it's very much a piece with the early 2000s. But it is something that just kind of feels like it's going to be one of the few works of art, I think, from that time period that is going to age and going to like stay with us. And I think there is a reason why the first three films were presented in the Museum of Modern Art back in like 2000 or whatever, 2010, I mean, when like Jackass 3D came out, because it's just like, it's, you know, it's raw and it's not pretty. It can be very bizarre and unsettling and not easy, but there is something oddly kind of beautiful about it often, and something that's very you know, very, very true to what art is. It just kind of exposes who we are as men often, or this as people, or just very gross humans. Humans are very gross things. It's like the Jackass movies they're shock comedy and they're body horror at the same time. It's very it's like
absolutely
it's this very weird combination, but it's, yeah, like I said, I continue to only admire and appreciate what they're doing, and I continue to admire the film, especially upon rewatch with time as well.
Yeah, and it's like I was listening when Knoxville was talking to Mara, and he was like talking about that scene from History of the World Part 1 where like the caveman's doing comedy and then the dinosaur just like picks him up and takes him off and everyone just starts laughing about it. It's just like it's ingrained in our DNA to laugh at our friends. And,
right.
You know, and I feel like, you know, I always go back to that quote from The Incredibles and like Twisted Around for stuff where it's like, if everybody's a jackass, then like nobody's a jackass. Right. Like this, all of this stuff is like, and again, in the kind of maker age where everyone has access to really good digital equipment and, you know, you can just create things, and then you have the whole ridiculousness thing on MTV where it's everyone's like, that MTV is making money off of everyone else's jackassery. It's like, you know, the artistry is what's always going to set this stuff apart. It's the artistry and the empathy. It's like if you just watch one of your friends just like fall off and like bang their head against the wall, it's like you're going to get the base level of humor, but it's like you're missing the fact that like Spike Jonze, one of the great filmmakers of his generation, is one of the hugest like creative driving forces. It's like he hasn't made a movie in almost 10 years.
Has it been that long?
Yeah, Her was 9 years ago, almost. Yeah, so we're really pushing. I mean, I guess release-wise, maybe 8 because it came out.
Well, he did the Aziz special, but that's not really a film,
that's
I guess,
true.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. And then he directed, I think he did a documentary. or was someone involved in a documentary?
Oh, he did the Beastie Boys documentary.
That's right. Yeah, the Beastie Boys story, which is good. Very good movie. But like, there's such a level of thought that goes into the way these are sequenced, the way that they design the crafts, like, and they're obviously playing with, you know, Paramount's money, which is very helpful in the way they're devising all of this. It's like, these are the experts. These are the pros. They're the ones that understand the artistry of what they're doing. And the Jackass format in and of itself is a really cool artistic, you know, motion. The way that they edit the things together, the way they kind of let the thing fade in, fade out, just the time they put in, the way that they know how to kind of ramp up each stunt as it goes on, like the dynamic they've created, like it's a really impressive form of performance art. And it's just like I feel like that's the reason partly it is at MoMA, is because it's like, I think a lot of these really, you know, highfalutin types, and, you know, and again, the Jackass guys will never ascribe to any of this, which is partly the point, but like, there is an artistry at play, and I think that, you know, again, it's the reason why the critical consensus has just skyrocketed, and why now all these movies get such critical praise, is because like the old class of critics really didn't get it. And all the critics now are just like, yeah, we totally get this, you know, and it's not just nostalgia. It's that art has evolved past that kind of old guard of film criticism that really didn't get these movies.
Right.
Because like, oh, these guys are just so stupid, blah, blah, blah. And it's the same reason like Freddy Got Fingered is getting such a cultural reevaluation 20 years later.
Sure.
Is because people now can see the subversion of humor that people like Tom Green were pioneering at the time. You know, and it's just like, I mean, I think Roger Ebert kind of knew what was coming, because I mean, he in that legendary review he wrote about that movie, he was like, you know, and however long, it's like, I get people are gonna, you know, probably think this is whatever, but I just don't think it's very funny, which is very fair for him. But it's like, you know, especially with comedy, it's like, it's always going to be one step ahead of the people who don't get it. And like, I feel like with Jackass, it's like, it wasn't just people didn't understand the humor. It's like, you didn't really understand the level of difficulty that was being pulled off to make the stuff work. And I don't know, I feel like thankfully this one's obviously getting great reviews, and, you know, it's becoming a huge cultural thing in the moment. It did really well at the box office for, you know, pandemic's sake, and, you know, for what type of movie it is. So it's just like, I don't know, Jackass endures, and, you know, the people that didn't get it don't eventually, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't want to like go too far into like the conversation of like art's place or comedy's place in society, because I feel like that's a whole other discussion that's going on right now. I don't want to be involved with that, with the Joe Rogan thing. I just don't.
Oh gosh,
don't want to, or the Whitney Cummings thing, or just I don't want.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's the whole thing people are having now.
I'm not at all interested in dealing with that.
No. That tweet was so bad.
But it's so funny that conversation's happening while Jackass Forever is in theaters, and it's like these, like, you know, nothing against Whitney Cummings and a few other people, but like some stuff against Joe Rogan, obviously, but like this idea of like they're like the values of comedy, like comedy is, it's about accepting your role and telling the truth even if you don't like it. And then meanwhile, like the Jackass guys are just like, what if we hit Danger Ehren in the balls with the pogo stick? And you know,
and they did. And they certainly did.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'll be blunt, that says to me way more about the world than any like self-serious comedian who's trying to, like, you know, my favorite, I saw one good tweet about all of this, and it's like, nobody's George Carlin. George Carlin wasn't even George Carlin. Like, that was the whole point. It's like, you know, sometimes, like, and not to start this whole conversation, but like, you know, comedy is very like,
right.
The point is to make you laugh. That is supposed to be the goal. If you're not laughing at a comedy special, then it's not comedy. And it's and like when people were giving what's
Whitney Cummings?
No, the
Joe
person
Rogan?
that did Nanette.
Hannah
Gadsby crap.
Gadsby,
It was like, did you watch it? It's hilarious. Like, I get that she's like mixing in. Oh, it's fantastic.
I've heard.
And it's like, people were saying like, oh, this isn't comedy. And it's like, okay, then why was I laughing the whole time? Like, I mean, yeah, some of it's very serious, but the way she like still weaves in comedy with it makes it comedy. It's like, you can do whatever you want to with the medium, but if you're making me laugh, then the goal's accomplished.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was like whole, like, I remember, and this has been shared around a bunch, but like with the the Whitney Cummings thing, Mark Maron just replied to it. So it's like, I would add be funny to the list, which is kind of like the real response is just like, like, I mean, at the end of the day, the role of a comedian is to do comedy and to be funny. Like, it's like, I mean, there's, whatever, like what everyone gets something different out of comedy. Comedy is subjective, but it's mostly just to be funny. But let's move away from that whole tangent. Into kind of we've discussed already like the cultural role of Jackass, but from a more personal level, what's like your relationship with the series, and what's your like opinion on the 4 or 5 films leading up to this, or I guess the 3 or 4.
So I kind of came to Jackass like a lot of people my age, which is like late at night on basic cable. I remember when reruns of the first Jackass movie would come on. I was very transfixed. It was like at the perfect age of being able to just kind of be like 12, 13 years old, just being like, whoa. And it was especially those scenes that they shot in, I think it was in Japan, where Chris Pontius would like go around and like
it was Party Man.
Boy. Yeah, Party Man. Yeah. He would, and just like them running around and like I think like panda bear suits and just like falling down and
well with him with Party Boy, where he's just like with the like the thong, and he's just like kind of like like grinding up the people and stuff like that. And I don't know, I mean, outside I say like I mean the Japanese stuff is still funny, but I feel like that's probably some of the stuff about Jackass that's kind of maybe aged not so great, because it's kind of it's hard to tell if like the joke is more like because of like they're making fun of how just like Japanese culture is, or if it's just more just like how absurd it is. It's like it's a weird balance. I don't know if they always quite nailed that first movie, but like there's so much stuff like just like Wee Man in the huge cone, and he's like trying to go up the escalator. Stuff like that's just so funny.
Oh, it's timeless. And it's just like I'll never forget just like seeing that stuff. And obviously the car scene, which is the the pinnacle moment in the first film, where one of the sadly deceased cast members, Ryan Dunn, he puts a toy car up his ass on a condom, and like he has to go to the doctor and show it. And it's just like when you're in middle school and you're watching that, it's just like that's what it is. I mean, that's comedy. Like that's the funniest stuff you could possibly imagine. And like I just latched onto it. I love Johnny Knoxville. I was a huge fan of the movie The Ringer, which is I rewatched that in process for all of this, and that was an incredibly edifying watch, and a very, I don't know, that's one of those movies where like I'm kind of glad no one's like discovered it again, because I think it would spark a lot of conversation. I actually
man, if TikTok discovered The Ringer, that's going to be a day.
But and then they would also have to discover, which would be even more fascinating, because I had the DVD for some time, and there is a the Special Olympics basically like endorses the whole movie. Like they have a whole like thing, which is so interesting. Like, and obviously there's a lot in that movie that's just like, I mean, clearly we're not gonna do that anymore. But it's just like it's just such a, that is a whole different conversation for another day. But I mean,
that's a fascinating film, honestly. I mean,
it is
weirdly fascinating film.
It's just it was very ahead of its time in some ways, and then also just like very firmly in 2005 forever.
I mean,
but like
if he even attempted to pitch that movie, like for all this talk of like you couldn't do whatever Pulp Fiction today, yada yada yada, but like whatever, you couldn't do Pulp Fiction, you couldn't do Blazing Saddles, whatever.
You can't do The Ringer.
The Ringer probably would not get the green light. Let's just say that.
It's got one of the best teaser trailers of all time.
I have to check that out. I don't know if I remember.
It is. It's a scene from the movie, and it's Johnny Knoxville's character going into a confession booth, and the priest is like, "Son, tell me what's going on." And then Johnny Knoxville basically just says what the movie's about, and then a fist just flies through.
I remember. Yes, yeah.
And then it just the priest starts beating the crap out of him. He falls down the steps, and it's just like that's all you need to know. I remember it because it's like father. Father, and then just poof. Which I mean, when you know what the movie's about, it's like it makes sense. But like and again, I love Men in Black 2. Like I was a huge Johnny Knoxville fan. So it's like I was hook, line, and sinker for all of this. Mm-hmm. And like Jackass 3D was one of my favorite like movie experiences growing up, because I just turned 18. Obviously, I mean, well, actually, people don't know this. In Tennessee is the only state in the in the 50 where you have to be 18 to buy an R-rated movie ticket. So everywhere else is 17, but for some reason in Tennessee it's 18. Literally nowhere else, just Tennessee. It's ridiculous, but I just turned 18 like a month before, and I could like go to the movie and like buy the ticket. And this is like at the height of 3D, and I wasn't a big 3D fan. So, but the way that they used 3D was so fascinating. But it was just being in like a rowdy, loud 2010 movie theater on a Saturday night, watching Jackass and just scream laughing your head off. Like, I mean, that's just like and there's a whole song on the closing credits, like Memories. It's like, yeah, that's, I'd love to go back to that. Like if I could have that night over again, then sure, I would love to do that. And it just kind of puts a footprint in your past. And, I've watched a ton of movies, and that's just always one of the experiences you never, ever forget. And, I liked Bad Grandpa quite a bit, and I've always loved the Jackass movies, I never, after Action Point, I was just like sold, they're never going to do this again. Like, Knoxville took it badly in that movie, and that's obviously the film where they mixed in narrative with the stunts from a few years ago, but they found a way to do it again, and I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed this new one. But like, the Jackass movies are always going to be near and dear. Like, I will never have a bad thing. And obviously there are some things we need to talk about later in the show about where Jackass has developed in certain ways with the cast, but it's like, in terms of just the general art of all of it, I mean, I'm always going to be a huge fan.
Yeah, I mean, for me, as I think mentioned before, I feel like weirdly I've had to sort of mature into Jackass a little bit more, which is an odd thing to say, but I liked the movies when I watched them. I similar to you, I think I came into them because I was getting into film, and I had seen Johnny Knoxville a number of things. And even if I didn't always love the movies like Dukes of Hazzard, I always found him to be a fairly charismatic, appealing screen presence. And I also think he's a better actor than I think people give him credit for, which for whatever reason, maybe because he's a stuntman turned actor or whatever, people don't really want to acknowledge that he's a fairly good actor, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I watched the movies, and I was kind of torn on the first one because I was like, I recognize I'm watching something bold and transgressive. I didn't really know at the time as like a young Catholic teenager if I was really enjoying this, but there's obviously like the golf course segment with the air horns, like stuff like that, and the party boy stuff that you mentioned, and the car stuff at the beginning where they rent a car where they put it through the derby and they return it all smashed. He's like, oh man, I hit a dog. And stuff like that, where it's very funny to me. And then obviously like we're they like just crap in a public bathroom or the public toilet store and stuff. It's just like stuff that like I never saw in a movie before, and it was just like it's just like, this is, even if it's not really my thing at the time, I recognize that this was something unique and something that was oddly kind of like powerful as a film. But I feel like the second one was where it really sort of clicked for me, Jackass number 2. And I think part of that is me growing, like I said, growing into the series. And I also think it's partly because the films itself have, I think with the sequels, they sort of matured into what their style is, even though I do really admire how much the first film is in tune with the show's sensibilities and how you can't, like you said, you can't really have Jackass without the show or the first movie. But I feel like the second one is like when I think of the Jackass films, it just has that combination of the camaraderie of the guys goofing around and all this stuff, and it has like that like kind of go bigger to go home sensibility with all the stunts being huge, and like a lot of the comedic sensibilities of it are just way bigger, oddly way more cinematic, and just like so much more elaborate than what we got before. And it was a improvement, I think, in basically every respect. And to me, that's probably the masterpiece of the 4 films, even though I do really enjoy all of them almost equally. I feel like that's the one where it's just like they just really sort of nailed what I think Jackass as a film should be. But I do remember seeing the third one in theaters like you, seeing in 3D with some friends, and being like, this feels like a proper send-off. Like it didn't quite, I feel like, hit the same exact heights as it's 2, but it got pretty close. And it did have kind of like that like one last rodeo sort of feel to it. I mean, obviously this was before Ryan Dunn passed away, but not long before he passed away. And there was like that sense, especially watching the end credits, where it's just like you kind of went on this journey with them, and now they're going to kind of grow up and kind of find their own way. And like it's ever going to be like this exactly the same again. And obviously that's the case because, you know, Ryan Dunn is no longer with us. But when they announced the fourth film, similar to you, I was just like, I don't really know if it's still going to work because they're older now and Dunn's not around. And it's like, what can they really do at this point? It's mostly going to be pranks and all this stuff. But I was obviously for it. I'm like, I love those first three movies so much. I want to see where it's going to go. And I recognize that like it felt like it was beneficial for Bam Margera because I from what I can tell, the second and third movies were ways for them to kind of keep Steve-O in line. Like he was dealing with his own addiction problems at that point, and I think he had relapsed shortly after the second film. And the third one was just kind of their way of like, you know, they had like a pretty clean, sober set from what I can tell with the third film, and they were like able to kind of keep it in line to kind of show them how you could have fun and still do all this stuff even if you're not, you know, like drinking and doing copious amount of drugs. And that kind of adds to the emotional poignancy of that film. And it sounded like the fourth movie, from what I can gather, this is a lot of speculation, so I don't want to say for certain, but it did seem like that fourth movie was a way to kind of keep Bam in check and allow him to kind of find his sobriety and like kind of rekindle that love and spirit for them. But even though he was around for the start of filming, the production for this film has faced a number of issues, obviously with COVID, preventing it from being a smooth production as far as like filming in the expected timeline, but also allowing Bam to be involved because Bam has now been, you know, continuing to struggle with his own personal demons. And unfortunately, that has caused him to have somewhat of a riff with the other members, including getting what sounds like restraining orders from Jeff Tremaine, the director, and Johnny Knoxville. And it just sounds like a really sad situation. And given the limitations of COVID, I was just kind of like, what is this movie going to really... I'm still excited. Like I see that trailer and I'm just like, it's going to be fun. It's going to be exciting. But is it really going to be Jackass again without Dunn, without Bam, and being in a COVID time? And I feel like watching the fourth movie, I don't know if it's exactly the same. Like I said, I feel like the third one felt more to me like this is like the accumulation of what Jackass is. But there was that, like we said before, there is that catharsis that was there before, but now felt even richer in a way that I wasn't expecting, because not only because we live in COVID, there is like this idea of like people touching and like doing all these gross things has like a kind of heightened emotional connection, because it's just like it's just almost sort of like taboo in its own way to see people doing all this stuff in a COVID time, but like also a sense of people getting together again during COVID, even though we are a few years into the pandemic now. This idea of like friends kind of against the odds being back together and getting around and palling around and being their goofy, loving selves is just also very endearing and affectionate and poignant in its own way. But also, as you mentioned, like there's this extra element where it is now like a legacy sequel where you know, they're inviting the new era or like the new age of Jackass, and they're recognizing that it's not solely, you know, like a bunch of suburbanite white males. It's, you know, there's a couple women involved. There's, you know, people of different backgrounds and ethnicities, and it's, you know, evolving in something that's going to be hopefully bigger and more expansive as time goes on, even as Johnny Knoxville and Steve-O and Wee Man and Preston and Chris and everyone else is no longer involved, or maybe only involved in a limited capacity. It's still going to be Jackass because the spirit of Jackass is still going to live on. And it's like the rare legacy sequel in a way that feels like it's actually on par with the other ones, because it's still capturing what makes Jackass Jackass. And even if it isn't exactly the same, it still reaches those levels because it continues, as we say, to evolve and become what Jackass is for a new generation. And just it's just weird to kind of acknowledge that about a film and TV series where people were just hitting each other in the balls and puking and throwing up on each other and just goofing around. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like with this new one, we can kind of get into the exacts. Like, I have like one complaint about the new movie, but everything else is just like very glowing. The opening of the film is just great, particularly to watch in a theater with other people.
Oh yeah, incredible.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, no notes. It's great.
I don't even know if we want to give away what that is, but it's just it was truly one of the best cinematic moments probably I'll see this year, to be honest.
Yeah, it's very hard to describe. It's the magic of movies. I mean, just go in. as green as you possibly can, pun intended. But it's just great, and like it also gave me the excuse to write something for work because a guy who went to a high school here in Nashville was the football player that tackles Danger Ehren in the opening scene. So I got to write about that. So that was fun. And then PK Subban. Oh, really? Yeah, I think it was Jalen Ramsey. Went to Brentwood Academy.
Hopefully we can share that because I would like to read that as well.
Yeah. He went to, he's played for the Rams. He's about to be in a Super Bowl Sunday. So he's having quite a week. But yeah, he's like the best cornerback in the NFL, I guess, now. And he went to Brentwood Academy for high school. And then PK Subban, who's a former Nashville Predator, I included him in the story too because he's the hockey player that nails. Also does some really bad. A lot of Middle Tennessee folks really hurting Danger Ehren. Yeah, just, you know, there's so much I want that I can say great about this movie. Just the stunts were hysterical. The pacing was great. You know, they find so many different ways to torture themselves. The only thing about the movie I wish was a little bit better was the finale. You know, the finale was quite good, but I just feel like, you know, when you have like the Busby Berkeley homage in 2,
which is the best ending, I think.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah. Yes, no, just incredible. And then the car scene in 1, and then in 3 they have the slow-mo stuff and the water and everything. Mm-hmm. It's just like I felt like this time it just didn't quite live up to that as much for what you would hope with the final stunt in a Jackass movie.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's a small complaint. I mean, the whole experience is just so fun.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the ending, since you bring it up, is concerned, without getting into quote-unquote spoilers, I guess, such as there might be spoilers for a Jackass film, I think the idea of it is interesting in that, like, it's like basically a stunt that becomes the ending of the film. Mm-hmm. Or the climax of the film is like, it's very interesting on paper, but there is like, well, for one, there's no Rip Taylor, which I think
that's a huge thing.
I mean, people may, I guess, underestimate how I feel like that kind of added to like the finality of it or whatever. But
if Rip Taylor had come out in like camo gear and was like doing stuff, I feel like it would have been a little bit easier.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, having passed in 2019, that just wasn't ever going to. I was hoping they'd do some greater tribute. Did they throw confetti at the end? I was trying to remember.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I was hoping they'd just do something to like kind of just acknowledge Rip Taylor, but unfortunately, that wasn't. That was one of my.
Where's our Rip Taylor hologram? They can do it for Luke Skywalker, but they can't do it for Rip Taylor.
Or,
like, come
on. I think Whitney Houston is. In Vegas right now. Yeah, I don't know.
Jeez.
Whatever. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, yeah, it didn't disappoint me, but it did kind of feel like I was expecting something, I guess, given the way that the last 2 films ended, it was going to be bigger. And I would say one of my disappointments was I was expecting, since Eric Andre was around, that he would have a bigger part in the actual stunts themselves. Like, I don't know if there was a stunt or 2 that he did that wasn't in the film, like it's going to be in 4.5 or whatever, or if they were concerned that like maybe he had some film project or a TV show that there's like we can't have him like potentially getting hurt for 2 months and delaying shooting on Righteous Gemstones season 2 or whatever, where he's quite good right now. But yeah, I was, since he was part of the cast, I was a little bummed that he wasn't a bigger part of the like actual jackassery of it, outside of like a prank or 2, or just being there for like stunts, but like not participating in them. But other than that, I mean, like, as we've sort of mentioned, I don't think this one is quite as transgressive or quite as like boundary pushing as the other ones. Like, not to say that it's like resting on its laurels or being comfortable with itself, but it does kind of feel like, compared to the other ones, it's not like pushing itself beyond like pushing the limits as much as far as like good taste or like what can or cannot be in a film as far as like moral standards. But I do think there is like this sense that like every single sequel wants to be better and better than the last one, whether it reaches those heights or not. And they clearly put a lot of effort into being even more bombastic and more celebratory with each film. And like, even like we said, with the challenges that went into this film, I feel like it felt in the film itself fairly seamless as far as like just being true to itself and getting all like these celebrity cameos and all these like extra guest stars, but like still having the main cast really do a lot, improving themselves, particularly and surprisingly, Danger Ehren, who has usually been a bit of a punchline in the other movies, particularly in 2, where he is like the big butt of the joke in what's maybe the best scene in that film. But yeah, I mean, just like, finally, not that he's like his moment of glory per se, but like he's like just clearly like kind of stepping up and being able to be like the big man on campus here for this film is not at all what I expected, and I think one of many delights I got in this film for sure.
I feel very strongly about this because I wanted to talk about Danger Ehren. They failed Knoxville on Jackass #2, not giving him an Oscar nomination. They terribly failed poor Steve-O and not giving him an Oscar nomination in 2010 after the thing where he went into the porta potty and was stuck up in the air like a bungee jump. Just brilliant. I am going to stump as hard as I can for Danger Ehren to get that supporting actor nomination this year. I mean,
does it count as an acting performance though?
I think it has to. Okay. I mean, it's like if Jared Leto's thing can count as acting, then surely poor Danger Ehren can get something.
Well, I'm just saying that like, if there's arguments to be had about whether or not Andy Serkis in the Planet of the Apes movies is giving a performance or if that's digital trickery, I feel like maybe Danger Ehren for supporting actor might be a bigger hill to climb. But I'm not opposed to it, to be clear.
It's never going to happen. It'll happen on the Corey Woodruff ballot, but at least for my like Critics Association this year. But like, I mean, it's the bear scene is so good, but it's the nut shots. It's the thing he just stands there and takes it, and it's just so overwhelming to watch this poor man go through so much and just still do it with a smile on his face. And this is a guy who had a tooth pulled out of his mouth by a Lamborghini. It's like he has been through the ringer for these people. And I listened to him talk about on a podcast with Steve-O about like he's kind of self-conscious about like, I really don't like it when they are overtly like picking on me. Like that he kind of at times can be a target for his friends, and kind of like sometimes it does like push the boundary too much, and he kind of like set his healthy boundaries like, hey, I don't want to do this, I don't do that. But it felt like this time he really was at the center of his domain, and I think he's like if you want to give like an MVP for the movie, I think he is very much I think that's fair. The MVP. But I was going to ask you like a 4-top question of like who's your MVP, what's your favorite prank, who's your favorite new person, and what was the hardest you laughed. So I'll give you that 4-peat, and I'll give you mine.
You might need to repeat those questions because I don't know if I remember them all. But
go ahead.
But going back to Air, I was going to say, like, you're telling me that he wasn't chill with them putting pubes on his face after staging a terrorist attack gone wrong segment, that wasn't super chill with him in 2. I mean, he's really gone. I mean, he's been through the rough of it, but like you said, he does it with a smile on his face for the most part and tries to, like kind of prove his worth, which is very endearing and also a little sad at the same time. But with this movie, I think, like you said, like, I don't know if I'd go so far as to say he's the MVP, but I feel like he's the one that really like most improved or something like that. Like he's the one that like really goes up there and just like puts it all on display and says like he is in this crew for a reason, you know what I mean? Like, so to answer your question, so let's see, what was the first one? Best
MVP.
Stunt? Oh, MVP.
Let's do MVP, best stunt, favorite new person, hardest you laughed.
Okay. Let's see. I had just said that I don't know if I'd qualify Danger Ehren as the MVP, but now that I think about it, he might actually be the MVP of this movie, in my opinion, too. I mean, because it's just like too easy to say Johnny. Like, I was gonna maybe go a little transgressive and say like Jeff Tremaine, because he also is like kind of like just putting himself out there in some respects. He gets more screen time with this one too, which is kind of fun. It kind of adds to like the personalness of it, even though this is like easily the biggest, most expensive film of them all. But okay, so what's the second question?
What was your favorite stunt or prank?
Stunt? Well, I think prank was probably Silence of the Lambs.
Mm.
I thought that scene was hilarious. That might be the hardest laugh I got out of it, because that scene, just the whole. I don't want to give it away for anyone who might be listening who hasn't watched the movie yet, but just the reveal of where it's going and just seeing it. That's another thing about Jackass I love as well, is that like, they play with expectations in many respects, obviously, but like a lot of the time they just kind of plainly tell you what's going to happen, and they just play it out like that, and it's still just it's either not only still funny, but sometimes often funnier because like you're kind of in on the joke too, and you're like you're part of the crew like that respect, because you're knowing something that sometimes even they don't really know, because you're one up as far as where they're going to be, and that's something kind of magical in its own sort of way. But yeah, I think that's probably the hardest I laughed, to answer one of your later questions, and probably my favorite prank for sure. Favorite stunt, I really like the Icarus one, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I feel like that's like the one that's like weirdly the most beautiful too. Like just in terms of like a visual presentation, is evocative of the rocket in the second one. Mm-hmm. And it's also like kind of like, there's a lot of stuff going on here about paralleling like the past and the present, and like kind of like doing some stuff that's either directly mimicking or like vaguely related to stuff they did in the past. And that's something also about this movie that's pretty interesting as well. But so what was your last question or final two questions?
Favorite newbie.
Favorite newbie, I think I'm gonna go with Rachel.
Oh, okay.
I feel like she's the one that kind of stepped up and proved herself maybe the most outside of Zach. And Zach's probably like a close second for me, just because I liked his just willingness and commitment to doing this. I guess he's been kind of proving himself in other various things throughout the years. I just saw he did a project before this with Sarah Squirm. I don't know if you saw Sarah Vaccine recently, but like he's in that, and he's getting like rat traps on his nipples in that video and all this stuff. And it's just like, I guess he's been kind of just like trying to prove himself for a long time, and now he's here. I don't know. How'd you feel about Poopsies? I was curious to hear about your opinion on Poopsies.
I thought he was good. He kind of gave them. I think he almost filled a little bit of Bam's gap a little bit outside of like torturing your parent. He kind of has that good straight man quality, and he's just very durable. And I feel like the Jackass crew always needs just like one straight guy who's funny, but also just very, very durable. And I feel like Bam was always kind of that for them. And I feel like he kind of helped.
Bam was?
In a way. I feel like
not like Ehren or like Dave England.
Dave England definitely would be one of the people, but I felt like, I don't know, it's just for some reason the Bam loss wasn't quite as bad because you had a Poopsies type, I guess. I don't know. And Bam was more of a prankster, but I also feel like Bam was always very, like, he can hop right back up after something happens. Like, he kind of has a sprightness to him that he could take some of the more physical stuff that I thought Poopsies kind of filled in for.
And Bam was also a little bit younger, it seemed like, than the other. So there's like kind of like that little brother mentality to him, where he's like kind of like, you know, like being a little rascal, but also like the big brothers like kind of like put him in his place some places, like with the snake thing in the third one.
And then Poopsies has that scene where he talks about watching Jackass when he's 12, and he's like, I'm here, and it's like, oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I feel like I didn't dislike Poopsies, but I felt like it was weird. Like they were like really like pushing Poopsie a lot in a way that I feel like he wasn't proving himself as much. I just didn't quite get it, but I agree with you that like there was that kind of like little brother mentality with him too at the same time, where it's kind of like I think the crew could see a lot of themselves in Poopsies, so that they kind of endeared themselves to him, kind of in the same way they can see themselves in Bam at the time.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, but I also enjoyed Dark Shark, and what was the name of his son?
Jasper.
Jasper, that's right. I couldn't remember his name. I like them both. I think at times I was worried that they were trying to like replace Bam and his father, but I feel like they kind of found their own little moments in between, especially Dark Shark. Yeah. But like I said, I mean, the only disappointment with the new crew is, like I said, I just kind of wish Eric Andre had more to do, especially because he's proven himself to like be more incapable of pulling off these kind of weird, elaborate, over top pranks and stunts with his own work, and with Bad Trip. So yeah. Was there another question, or were those the only ones?
No, you had them.
All right, cool.
So I guess I've talked about my MVP being Danger Ehren. I think my favorite prank of all of it was I don't know. It was a very simple one. It was when they hit Steve-O in the face with the beach volleyball. And then they use a jugs machine and just smack it. I was crying. I mean, I literally thought I was going to pass out during that. I don't know what about it just killed me.
Yeah.
But it just, oh my gosh. I think my favorite stunt was the cup check because it's a mix between that and Knoxville's moment with the bull. Because the Knoxville's one with the bull is like beautifully cinematic and tragic because he literally will never be able to do that again after that. That's literally his last rodeo. And maybe the last time he's ever involved in a major stunt. That may be it for him because of the way that his brain responded and how he basically cheated, having major impairment issues the rest of his life in that moment. And I'm guessing that he's probably, I think they will do another one eventually. And I'm sure when he does that, he'll be more of a hype man and like an intro guy than anything. And May could do some smaller stuff, but I think his days of being...
He'll be like a ringleader, I guess, type. Like, like in the top hat being like, welcome to the show.
Yes, which I think is, in some ways what he was in this, but he still got in on some really big stunts. Yeah. It just feels like for the way that injury went and him being, again, he had a cognitive score of 17 after that injury took place. Like he was in bad shape and it took him months of recovery. He went through depression. Like it was a very bad situation.
Yeah, and same with Steve-O too. He had a pretty bad fall in the treadmill scene. Yeah.
Yes, he had to go to the hospital and, he had to be taken on a stretcher. So it's like they understood their limitations on this. But it was beautiful watching Knoxville like one more time with the bull and just you have to get on your hands and knees and be very thankful that he was okay after that in the general sense. And thankfully he's like doing press and he seemed fine. But the cup shot to me was just one of the greatest tests of endurances. And then the final pogo thing just... I nearly fell out of my seat. I was just cringing so hard. My favorite, I think my favorite new person was Dark Shark. Just just the way, especially the spider scene, just the way that he just seemed like the reluctant dad that was just like, I'm just doing this because my son's here. Just great all around.
Yeah. Yeah, weirdly, I mean, you reminded me of something that I was kind of thinking about earlier, which is that watch this movie almost weirdly kind of reminded me of my experience watching the most recent Mission Impossible movie and like thinking about like how Tom Cruise literally puts his life on the line for these stunts and for our own entertainment. And like there is like kind of like that, like I don't want to say like voyeuristic, but like there's like sort of a sense of like you're watching a man like skirt on the edge of death and maybe even cheat death just for like our entertainment. And like, like that stunt kind of reminds me of like some of the, like there was that one stunt in the last one where like Tom Cruise, it was like life threatening, but he like really banged himself up and like he, kind of like had like a little like followable moment where he realized that he can get pretty, seriously hurt doing a stunt, but he also like kind of commits to it anyway. And you see that in the film and like, and there's like that kind of weird danger element with like the last 3 Mission Impossible movies where like, you're watching, I mean, clearly, it would be a big news story if Tom Cruise died making the movie. Same like with like, like you're not watching like, you're not going to watch Johnny Knoxville or someone die. Like they're not going to put that in the film if that happened. Like this one released the film, but there is like that kind of weird thing. But yeah, there is like that weird kind of thing where like you watch a movie like Jackass 4 and it's just like, are we going to see one of these guys die? Like it's just like it's like I mean obviously not, but like there is like that like kind of fear, especially with like when they fall down and they don't get back up again, and as some of the guys do, as we mentioned, like with Steve-O and Johnny Knoxville this time, where they fall and they're not bouncing on their knees and like woo-hoo-hoo, like that was a tough one or whatever. It's they're older and that gives a kind of tenderness and a vulnerability to these skits, and then we're sort of vulnerable to begin with. Like that's kind of the essence of Jackass, that there is like the sense of like these like cocksure guys are kind of like stripped of their bravado in like a matter of seconds because there's like a snake or a spider or like something, they got kicked in the balls even, or like a foot in the ass. They, they're puking because they ate their own piss snow or whatever, and it's just like
as one is wont to do.
Yeah, and it's just like this weird kind of like vortex of like us watching people kind of go from like on top of the world being like I'm announcing myself, and then like instantly kind of just like recoiling because their body fails them or like they can injure. But yeah, it's all for our entertainment, and like it's not like, you know, like they did it involuntarily for the most part, like, you know, like they're willing participants and they do it all with a smile on their face, and it's just this weird kind of like yin yang balance of pain and glory and infamy and legacy, and it's just it's a good time. It's like kind of a lot at once, and also it's very digestible at the same time. So it's a very weird sort of inscrutable balance, but something that's just fascinating to watch and very entertaining, of course.
There's nothing better to me than sitting in the theater and listening to Johnny Knoxville's voice read you the Jackass warning. Like, I'm going to go see this again in a theater at some point, just so I can have that rush again of seeing the Dick House logo and then hearing that and then hearing the little Jackass twing kind of theme song go off. It just makes my heart feel warm.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised they didn't make a joke about how that song is literally named Corona.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's called Corona.
I didn't know that. That's great. What a world.
That song's called Corona.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of gets through the gist of it. We're kind of an hour into this, unless you have any major thoughts that you want to say before we call it a wrap and play the Rotten Tomatoes game on Jackass Forever, or just like any general final thoughts on the film.
No, I mean, I just see it. I mean, it gets my full recommendation. Like, I know that you might feel a little squirmish in certain parts. I think that's why John's not here, isn't it?
Yes, I meant to mention that like an hour ago, but yeah, John was, I mean, I'm sure he has like real reasons, but in my head canon, he's just being a big old wimp and choosing not to see these movies.
Come on, Negroni. He needs to do a Jackass marathon. Watch the first three, then watch Bad Grandpa, then go see this. It is way more satisfying than anything in the MCU. It's way more.
But he's like going around like, oh, what are we gonna do? Moonfall. It's like, no, Jackass Forever is the #1 movie in America. Everyone's talking. No one cares about Moonfall.
No, Roland Emmerich doesn't even care about Moonfall.
I had to see Moonfall today, and there were 2 other people in the theater, and I was like, I want to be watching Jackass Forever again. But
because I saw that with a relatively, there were a lot of people in the theater when I went, which made me feel good. I mean, I guess COVID's still going on, so wear a mask, but like, it was just nice being around people. That's the thing. When they pushed it back, I'm like, I'm fine with this. I can wait because I want to see this with people. Yeah, like this is why you go to the movies. Like, Jackass is one of the reasons that this experience I feel like will outlive us, because like, you can't replicate it at home. You just can't. Even if you have all your friends over, it's like, this is what movies are for.
I was really genuinely nervous that they were going to push this on to Paramount Plus, like, and make it a Paramount Plus exclusive. Because similar to, like, I was so relieved when this was in theaters, and also just seeing that opening scene in a theater, I was like, man, if I had to see this for the first time and only could see this on like Paramount Plus or on my TV, I'd feel like so robbed of the.
And to Paramount's credit, it paid off.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's honestly because Scream did well. Like, I don't know if they would have put in theaters if it wasn't for Scream. So I guess thanks to Scream.
Thank you, Scream. Thanks, Ghostface.
And you said this is doing well, right? Like, this is doing a decent business.
Yeah, it's already made its money back, and it's like just everything else that's in the red, basically. So it's like it's like $10 million budget, and it's like almost to $30 million right now. So it's like it's doing really great business.
So the rest is just gravy, I guess. And it's easily the best received film of all 4 of them, but we will talk about that more in this official round of the Rotten Tomatoes game. So before we begin, have you seen the Rotten Tomatoes score for Jackass Forever?
Yeah, it's like 89 right now, or 85.
Okay, that's your prediction?
Yeah, I think it's 85.
Okay. I guess I should have asked you beforehand if you had seen the score, because that might have tempted fate in your favor. So what did you say, 89%?
At first I thought it was 89, but I think it's 85.
Okay, you are exactly on the money. It is 85% out of 115 reviews, including mine. I don't know. And is your review in here now that you're certified?
No, I've never written it.
Okay, you still haven't written a review for it?
It's all here, baby.
But are you going to write a review?
I don't think so.
Well, at least you've got your thoughts out here.
Mm-hmm.
But what about the audience score? Are you familiar with what the audience score is for this film?
Yeah, I would say maybe 93.
You are even better at this game than I am. You're getting these.
I was looking at it earlier.
Correct.
I just remembered it. So
man.
What do I win?
The love and affection of all the listeners here at Cinemaholics.
Do I get a Cinemaholics NFT?
That's never going to happen, but in spirit, yes.
Great. I could just save the JPEG on the Twitter picture.
Sure.
Yeah.
But we also guessed 2 other scores.
Okay.
We guessed the cinema score, and we guessed the Letterboxd average rating. So first, let's start off with the cinema score. Do you have a guess for what the cinema score is? I always find these interesting because it's seemingly a small pool of people in Vegas who I don't know. I don't even know if it's the same people every time or who they ask, but take your best shot. What do you think those crazy folks in Las Vegas are thinking about Jackass Forever?
It's a B+, right?
You are nailing all of these scores. That is exactly right. Did you know that one or did you guess that one?
Yeah, I knew it.
Okay. This is less fun when you know the actual scores, but that's neither here nor there.
Letterboxd, I have no idea.
All right. Okay. Well, this one will be a honest to goodness, genuine guess from Corey Woodruff. I apologize if I stall for these. I have to keep pulling them up, so I keep talking.
Fine. I'm going to guess 4.0.
So that's your guess, 4.0?
Yeah.
Let's see what we got for Jackass Forever. Was that an actual guess?
Yeah.
Man, you have nailed this game, Corey Woodruff.
Okay, I was worried I'd remembered it, but I guess I had remembered it.
It is exactly 4.0. You are exactly correct. So, yeah, you guessed all of these exactly right. Maybe a little bit of cheating, who knows? But you have
preemptive.
Sorry.
It's like Minority Report. You got me cheating before I did it.
Yeah. Or like what next?
Exactly. Yeah.
You could see 5 minutes. Was it the premise of that film where you could see 5 minutes in the future or whatever? Something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah. I don't think I ever saw Next.
Yeah. I finally saw a trailer today for The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent. I forgot to mention it. I'm excited at least. I mean, what's not to like so far?
Yeah, exactly. The only way to go is up.
Yeah. But yeah, that's our review of Jackass Forever. Thank you so much, Corey, for joining us.
Yes. It's per tradition on us that our podcast always goes really long. Like this could have gone another hour for sure.
Well, that's what I was thinking is that like I was saying before we recorded, I was like, well, I'll just probably cap it an hour. But I was like, part of me is just like, what if we made a 2-hour discussion about Jackass Forever?
Made John edit all of
it. But I mean, I don't know. I'm very glad that you decided to come on and talk about that. I wanted it to be a conversation. I wanted it to be from somebody who cough actually watched these films, but also had appreciation for it and recognize their critical and historic relevance and their continued critical and historical and audience commercial whatever, all these merits that the films have and probably will continue to have with audiences and scholars alike. And so that's Jackass Forever. It's now in theaters. Check it out wherever it's playing. And thanks for listening.
Amen.